Hi, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Very good. So Tracy, this morning we thought that we would chat a little bit about being women of a certain age and working with women of a certain age, which of course we both do in our clinical practices. And seems like a good meaty topic for us both to offer our experience in.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure that we could talk for ages and ages about it.
So, one of the first things that strikes me about being or working with women of a certain age is there's something that happens to identity, I think, and the sense of purpose, sense of direction seems to take quite a hit during without being specific and without using words like menopause or in your 50s or whatever, but there is a certain time frame, isn't there, when in my experience women suddenly put their head above the parapet and go, oh my goodness, where am I, who am I, what am I doing, what have I done, where am I going? Do you find something similar?
Absolutely. And I think I would recognise it as one of the natural life changes that people go through. And I think the difference about it is that up until this point, it has, I think, for many women felt like building. So each life change has led to a building of something else. So going through childhood, through your teenage years, you're building your education, you're looking ahead, you're thinking about work, you're building your career, you're building a family, all of that sort of stuff. You're excited about travel, etc., etc. Then, and it seems to be a very common pattern. There seems to come a point of endings, perhaps, where there is no longer a natural build, and I'm not really quite sure why that is.
I think that's a really, really good description, and it's also quite a useful metaphor, isn't it? That we build and build and build, and then we consolidate, and then there's a period of almost the opposite of building. I don't really want to use graphic words, but there is something about undoing, isn't there?
Or I think there's a danger of that if women are not able somehow to take everything that they've learned, everything that they've done, everything that they are, and purposefully direct that into the future. And I think, again, my experience of working with women in that kind of age bracket is almost that they've never had the space to be able to do that for so long, that suddenly when there is space, either things change at work or their family circumstances change, or perhaps health changes for them, they've almost lost the skills to be able to then say, okay, what comes next? Because there's perhaps not or less externally driving them to be able to do that. And I think that's a huge area for a lot of women, being able to help them rediscover those skills and thought patterns and processes and apply them in their new context.
And one of the common patterns I see with women of a certain age is the pattern of what's commonly termed as low self-esteem. And if we unpack that a little bit and we think about when you're building self-esteem in children, for example, then we know that we have to teach children to feel good from the inside based on doing the right thing for the right reasons. So taking the right actions, evolving the appropriate skills to enable themselves to move forward in life. And So there's something about when people refer to common parlance of low self-esteem, there's something in there about not having a goal, a target to connect to, or not having the skills to get from A to B. What do you think about that?
I think the goal is an interesting one. Sort of, if you think about up until that point, for many women, their goal has been, possibly career oriented and kind of the next step, and even a new career, whether that's a new job or developing in their current one or whatever it is. Often there's family involved, and the goals of the children become their goals, possibly the goals of their partner, their husband. And I know this is a very stereotypical kind of thinking, but I do think it's common, whether you have children, a career, a husband or a partner or whatever, and then suddenly there isn't that external goal. And I don't know whether there's something in culture, in cultural terms, whether there is still an expectation that women are the caregivers, we're the ones who nurture, all of that, all of those sorts of things, and I don't necessarily think that's wrong, because I think women are able, to do that really, really well. Men are able to do it as well, but naturally it seems to fall more to the women, even in the face of all the kind of diversity programs that there are about. And again, there's that kind of, it's what other people need, it's what's needed externally. And so we get out of the habit of thinking about what it is that we want, what it is, and I see that again and again with clients, that they say, well, I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. And for women in their 50s, there's another 30, possibly even 40 years of their life left, and really encouraging and helping women to kind of reform some of that is a really common theme across what I do.
And I'm thinking a bit again about what you were saying about the building of self through the first half century. We're building our strategies, our behaviours, our outputs. We're building our identity, our beliefs, our values. We're building our social positioning, and being needed or needing certain things, and so on. The social positioning is also an interesting one, I think, for us in mid-age, because we have experienced whatever social positioning means to the individual. We've experienced it, and then it stops. So there is a sense of being wise, and there's a sense of a positioning of an older, wiser person, and there's a sense of respect. But I recognise in my own world being moved from the main lane of the motorway, so in this metaphor, to a side lane, which is, well, yes, of course, tell me a little bit about this, Kay, or that, Kay, you've got this wisdom, this experience, or these skills, but coming up on the Ferraris and the Porsches and the supercars at super speed. And it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because we are moving over because the new, fresher, stronger energy is coming through, and I think NLP gives us the skills and adaptability to be able to reframe our social positioning. But of course, in our client work, that sometimes leaves a big gap, a big a big dearth of exaggeration.
I'm always interested in checking with clients that their fundamental needs are being met, because quite often they may have been, kind of edged to one side, and in this new sort of vista that they find themselves in, actually just revisiting that is really helpful, because I think ensuring that almost gives them a feeling of having a baseline, having a really solid grounding, having a kind of a fundamental stepping stone, if you like, to be able to then say, okay, yeah, what comes next for me? And being able to help them to build those resources, and kind of understand their own needs in amongst all of that. It seems to be a really, really important first step.
I think I quite accidentally, maybe a year or two ago, I was working with a middle-aged woman who was having a crisis in self-esteem and identity, and I happened to have in the room with me the basic needs kit from Happy Brain. And so I decided, that the most appropriate thing was just to talk her through each of the discs in turn, in a very ambiguous way, and setting it as the frame for it was, these are just metaphors, but let's just feel your response to these images. So, slowly, one by one, I pick a disc up and just offer it to her, and the simple things like nutrition, hydration, shelter, those simple things. But then when we started to look at issues around intimacy and connectivity, connection, and contact with nature, even, suddenly there was this huge emotional response with this particular client to issues around intimacy. And for this particular person, she had built a very successful career, had chosen not to have children, had had a very strong and independent life, but had suddenly reached a stage where an intimate relation, and I'm not talking about a sexual relation, but the intimacy of a significant other, suddenly, the moment she saw that disc, you could see visibly everything shifted and changed, because that was her insight that something was missing. And until then, she discovered it for herself, and which I think kind of resonates with what you're saying about what our job as coaches often is to draw attention to what it is they do not know. And these are fairly fundamental building blocks in resilience and stability and mental well-being.
Yes, and I mean, that's a brilliant story and a brilliant reflection on actually how simple it is to identify a place to start for many people, or even not start, even just having that light bulb is enough for some people. But it does make me reflect a little bit on maybe some of the reasons why that might have been missing, and that could be for a whole host of reasons, but I wonder how much it was missing for her as a young person, and then that pattern simply just repeated itself all the way through her life. Obviously, I don't know her, that could be completely irrelevant, but quite often when we're working as coaches with older clients, there's so many times a link back to, but when I was at home, or my mum and my dad, and I'm not trying to get all Freudian and into all of that at all, but once those patterns for life are established, if they're not interrupted, they continue. And for many of us, those strategies and patterns are really good. They help us get to the place where we are today. But suddenly, for some reason, at this stage of life, it seems to be a period of major reflection. And it's at that point that people discover that they can no longer carry on as they are, that the strategies that have served them really well have been great, but they no longer serve. And actually doing a little bit of digging back to, so where was it that bit actually went missing, and helping them to kind of rebuild from there seems to be a really effective way of helping them move forward. Have you discovered that as well?
I think that the whole theme of patterns, and by patterns, you and I know we're talking about neurological patterns. You know, how the mindscape, the landscape of our neural pathways, you know, whatever has habituated becomes stronger and automated and goes into the subconscious. So that's the autopilot. And a lot of our job, I think, working with all ages, is to draw attention to which of those habits, which of those patterns, pathways are providing the results that our clients want, and which ones need to change. I think there's also something else in the mix here about the patterns, the brain chemistry, the electromagnetic occurrences inside the brain that help us to function in the world, and that is the physiological, the chemical, hormonal changes that are very powerful at two significant times in our lives. One is in puberty and one is in menopause. And whilst we often deal very successfully with the incoming sensory data from the outside world, and we calibrate our client responses to what's happening in their environment and give them strategies to deal better with their environment, I think there's a tendency to overlook what information is coming from the inside, because that is quite a threatening environment to our basic brain, when hormones are dipping and rising with no regular pattern, when and our brain, just as in puberty, our brains kind of go into a bit of a stress response and stay there. I certainly, you know, as a pretty accomplished coach and therapist and so on, I even recognise, my heart rate's just gone a bit funny there, or I've got a different state. That you know, that's come from an internal response to chemical changes. And of course, using our skills, we can reset, rebalance, reorganise, not apply a meaning to it. But I do find a lot of my middle-aged female clients build a narrative that I just feel bad, I just feel, and they're actually describing a physiological response to the hormonal changes, and then the narrative, and this means, is then what leads them to feel it. And what if I feel like this for the rest of my life? Then what would be the point? And I'm sure it's connected to that person or this environment, rather than just strip it back to, we're just biological organisms, and we can influence our harmonies and balances through diet, through hydration, through movement, through time out, meditation, whatever the strategies are. But sometimes it's, I think, you know, the big difference that I think about, the main filter I look at my middle-aged clients through, is what's happening on the inside as well as what's happening in the outside world. So there's a real awareness of both. in the same way that if I'm dealing with a teenager who's having crazy tantrums or withdrawal or whatever it might be, it's also that awareness of these are significant impacts in affecting the way that our brains run.
Absolutely. And I find it interesting that in all the information that I've researched, that I've discovered, that I've read, that I've seen, etc., even in menopause groups, for want of a better word, there's a lot of information about the physical symptoms that come with menopause. Very, very little about the emotional impact, and not necessarily the I suppose the dramatic emotional impact that we do sometimes see, but more the kind of change in the way of thinking, looking at things in a slightly different way. All of those sorts of things just doesn't seem to be recognised anywhere. And for me, it's such an important aspect. And I wonder how many, and I've heard many of my clients say, how many clients say, I think I'm going mad. I don't know what this means. I'm behaving in this way. I'm thinking these things. I'm feeling these things, and I think I'm just going mad. And actually, even helping them discover that that's probably not the case. That actually that there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. It's just so helpful, and yet it's we just don't talk about it enough.
Well, I think there's a commonly accepted surface level talk about I'm going mad, my husband doesn't love me anymore, I don't love him anymore, or my children, or there's that surface structure narrative that cycles round, and it catches headlines in newspapers but of course in our work we are looking to capacity build, to say, okay, so this is where you're at, and where do you want to go, and let's look at the tools and skills that you need to adapt to this big transformation that you're going through.
Yes.
I reflected just last week. I was listening to a seminar with Dr. Richard Bandler, and I was listening to him help a lady, a delegate in the seminar, who had lost a memory of something very important, and without us discussing the content, the point is, she was a middle-aged woman, she wanted a particular memory, she'd lost it, and she felt bereft. Even though the strange thing, of course, is even though she knows the memory's there, and it was a nice memory and so on. And Richard quite simply took her to a different start point in the process of remembering, which was to us in NLP terms was just starting with a different submodality and going and linking to another submodality and another submodality and another submodality, and before the lady knew it, she was recalling in vivid memory this wonderful, wonderful thing that she had previously felt she'd lost. And again, it's the power of knowing what to do and where to go next. And that kind of links, I suppose I'm linking it back to one of the accepted difficulties that middle-aged women have, is this sense of brain fog. I don't remember things, and have I got Alzheimer's, and oh my goodness, what's going to happen, and I've lost all my confidence and what have you, and I recognise that, but of course what we know to be true is the first thing to do is to manage state and relax some of those stress filters, and then come at it from a different perspective. And okay, so that thing, how can I find those neural pathways in a different way? And I knowing how to use submodalities, the sensory systems, is a good starting strategy, isn't it?
And I often find, for many women, being able to, for across my whole client range, to be honest, but particularly for women, being able to use that as a starting point to build new strategies, or even to examine previous strategies and say, is it useful? Is it, I quite like that one. I'll keep doing that one. This one, no, not so much. I don't need to do that one anymore. And then putting other things in its place, and just so kind of discovering those neural pathways that may have gone from the conscious mind, but also building some new ones. And in terms of their behaviour and their thinking patterns, being able to look at what the options are, discovering new things, and sometimes in many different ways, whether that's through things like different things to look at, reading slightly different material that they may not have read before. So very practical kind of strategies really can help to just light up particular areas which they can then go on and explore, and then make those neural pathways stronger. It's kind of like opening up the world, isn't it? To see what's out there.
Yeah, and that's really relevant to the work that we do in NLP. Richard talks a lot about territorizing, which is to so we might map somebody, as coaches, we might map somebody's map of the world, so we get to know what it is they know, but then what sits on beyond that, what is it that they don't yet know, and how can we help them to expand those neural pathways out into that space, the thing that they do not know. And that's a very rewarding part, I think, of our work. Sorry, I was having a little chuckle to myself about just before we started this, about something that I know we've both talked about previously, which is, as young women, as kind of young, vivacious, attractive women, how we had a currency of attractiveness, and we would get a comment or a wolf whistle, or be able to get better results in a meeting or whatever, because we could flirt or use that extra special thing of being a young person, and it's gone now, and and it's a strange thing, because on one hand you think, excuse me, I remember very strongly as a young woman really objecting to being classified as pretty or vivacious or any of those things. I was like, I've fought it. It's like, I'm me,
some kind of object.
Yes, that's right, I'm not an object. You look into my brain, feel my heart, whatever. And now that it doesn't exist, it's like, oh.
I wish.
And it was a strange, because again I'm thinking of that build. I was building my resistance, and then once the resistance was no longer there, it's like, oh.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's really easy to look back wistfully, and those rose tinted glasses, and kind of all of those sorts of things, and there is no doubt there was lots of good stuff in all of that. And I do see, again, for lots of my client group, about, okay, that was great, you enjoyed it, it was good times. So the good times are still here, but they're just slightly different, and just helping them to change their view, kind of looking at life through a different lens, and valuing what is and what could be, as well as what has been. And I think particularly valuable is kind of doing the timeline thing, where can really value what's gone before, because you are today who you are because of everything that's gone before. And that's great, because now you've got all of those resources, if only we can just help you find them again and learn some new ones that are relevant to move on to the next phase, whatever that is. And obviously we're not prescriptive in doing that. It's up to individuals. But I do think there is value in kind of understanding what has been before and how that was, and then thinking, okay, so what is now? That, and what is the future?
I love that.
Yeah, I get the wolf whistle thing as well.
You get it?
No, I just get it as a concept.
Tell me your secret. But yes, the whole timeline thing, I think John Lavelle often talks about resources from the past for the future. And
yes.
Of course, that's exactly how we help people to organise their time, to pick out something valuable from the past to feed forward. So
yeah.
Another really powerful intervention, I suppose, that I would use with most of my clients is to have them look at an exaggerated timeline, to go back to the moment that they landed on planet Earth and just see themselves as a bundle of pure potentiality, just absolute potential, with no very little program, with no preconceived ideas or constraints, just potential, and to sort of enter into that space and explore it. And also to go to the far end of the timeline, to the what do you want to be? Just the moment that before you go to the pearly gates, or at the moment you reach the pearly gates. And let's assume that in Taoist tradition we reach the 120 mark and we've lived a good, wholesome life, and we've arrived at this place feeling content and complete, with good memories and feeling all of those really nice things. Let's just assume that. Let's go to that place, and what's the experience in there, and then looking back to this moment, midpoint. What do you thank the present you for? What do you thank this person in the present time for having done to make the second half of the journey as rewarding as it possibly can? And I find that use of timeline really powerful, again, for popping up insights, to help people to reorganise their value system and look for new strategies to operate towards that as a bigger goal.
And it's a great place to then start and say, okay, so what has to happen now for you to be able to get to the pearly gates, wherever, in that frame, in that state, what do you have to do now? And what's the very next step? What's the very next thing you will do to be able to do that? That's such a powerful question, isn't it?
Yeah, I love the phrase, you take one step in the right direction and the next one reveals itself.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's a nice one.
Exactly.
So Tracey, that's thank you very much as always for your time this morning. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you, and I know that we can talk for hours and hours and hours about many matters. I look forward to the next time that we can get together and discuss another topic. Until then,
great. Lovely to talk to you.
It's great to talk to you. Take care, Tracey.
And you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.